Hi everybody, Clark Atterbury here, a financial advisor with Atterbury Investment Management. Today we're talking about things you need to know about caregiving. And I have a very special guest I'm going to be bringing on in a moment who's going to tell you 10 things you need to know about caregiving. So we'll get to that in just a second here. Those of you who've seen my videos before know that usually I'm talking about investment management, retirement planning, financial matters, this sort of thing. So we're going to talk about non-financial matters, but things that are certainly relevant to retirement planning. Or honestly, a lot of our clients are dealing with this. I've got clients who are dealing with aging parents. I've got clients who are caregiving for their kids. So there's a variety of circumstances, and we all know this is a challenging situation. And so I wanted to bring on an expert in caregiving, even though it's not, talking about how to invest your money for retirement. So without any further ado, let me bring on my special guest. Whoops, that's not the right one. Let me bring in my special guest, Pamela Wilson. Hi, Pamela.
Hi. Hello, Clark. How are you today?
Doing great. How about you?
No complaints. Great.
Good. Glad to hear it. So me and my guests are so grateful to you for taking your time to come on and share your expertise and wisdom with us. You've been dealing with caregiving for 24 years. Tell our viewers a little bit about your background and who you are and what you do.
So how I got started in this was basically through life experience. I was 17 years old and my sister was killed in a car accident. My
Oh,
parents died when I was in my 30s. My brother died after my father. And I was working in corporate America and it didn't feel like it was rewarding. And so I made a change over into what I call healthcare and caregiving and aging. And so my first company, I had caregivers going into the homes of elderly and disabled and providing care. My second company was a care management and private fiduciary firm where I was a medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney, trustee, court-appointed guardian, conservator, personal rep of the estate. And I did that for 11 years. And then now I do caregiving education and I help companies in the healthcare field.
wow. That's a lot of valuable experience. You and I were chatting previously. Did you say you've worked with thousands of people?
Thousands of people over the years and blessed to do this in very unique experiences. So, sometimes you hear people talk about like the 0.5% of the times that this thing happens, right? I have that 0.5% of like the crazy things that happen that I talk to caregivers about because this actually does happen to people. And earlier you mentioned the word investment. I will tell you that an investment in your health and your well-being is one of the best investments you can make in life.
Amen to that. You've probably known people, I know I have. I've known people who are very wealthy, had more money than they could ever spend, but weren't healthy. And, they'd trade places in a second with somebody who didn't have as much money who was healthy.
It's so true.
Yep, yep. So, viewers, anybody's watching this live or if you're watching this in the replay, again, our point today is the 10 things all caregivers and aging adults should know about caregiving. So I'm going to walk Pamela through our 10 points and let her share her experience with us. Let's start with number one, which can be a little sobering here. And imagine it's not necessarily true if you're a caregiver for a child, for somebody younger than you, but the point is that caregiving results in death. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, and I want to address the point that you just made. Caregiving is really a lifelong journey. So what we don't think about is when you have children, you are a caregiver for those children. And then when you get married, you're a caregiver for your spouse, right? You're a caregiver for aging parents, and most of all, you're a caregiver for yourself. So when I talk about the fact that, caregiving eventually ends in death, it does. But I'll share a story. My mother, God bless her, she was such a planner and she had so many health issues. And so one day she comes to me and she's like, I'm so excited. Let me tell you what I did. I'm like, what did you do? She's like, I prepaid my and your father's burial. And
Hmm.
I'm like, oh my God. I was like, not prepared to have that conversation.
Mm.
Didn't want to talk about death. Didn't want to think about her dying. I was like in tears.
Oh,
But I have
yeah.
to tell you, when both of them passed, that thing that she did was such a blessing because we didn't have to rush and get a funeral together or burial or any of that. It was all prepaid for and all pre-planned.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
in the scope of planning, if you think about this positively, believe it or not, you can prepay for a burial or a cremation, and you lock in the rate so you're not paying 8% inflation every year that you wait. And it really does relieve the stress on your loved ones at the time that you pass. It also avoids family arguments. So kids saying, well,
Mm-hmm.
no, mom would want to be buried, dad would want to be cremated. None of that. It's all settled. So
Very
just a
interesting. Yeah.
sobering point, but there's positives to it.
Excellent. Excellent. The second thing you thought all caregivers and aging adults should know was that the question of who will be the caregiver.
This is a huge one too. So I would have clients come into my office and plan, and sometimes it would be the children. Other times it would be couples or single adults saying, I need a plan and my kids are going to do this for me. And I would always say to them, well, gosh, have you talked to them? Have you asked them about this? And they're like, well, no, they're just going to do it. And I'm like,
Uh,
no, it doesn't work out that way.
uh-huh.
The earlier that you talk about caregiving in your family, and you should talk about it with all generations. So your children, your parents, your grandchildren, talk about it when there's no health issues. It's so much easier because you can be much more objective about, yes, I want this, and no, I don't want that. And I'm saving money, or if I need care, will you be my caregiver? In my family, there were 6 of us kids. 2 had passed by the time my parents really needed a lot of care. But my one sister who lived in Oregon said, oh, don't worry, mom, I'll come back and live with you and take care of you. Well, at the time my mom needed care, that was just not practical.
Mm.
So having these discussions
Mm.
ongoing is really important in families.
Yeah, you and I chatted the other day, and one thing that came up is that often it's hard to have these conversations with parents. Not all, some parents will say, look, great, let's talk all about it. Other parents will say, I don't want to talk about this at all. What advice do you have for people whose parents don't want to talk about it?
So there's a statistic, and it's from John Hancock, and it says that I think it's over 60% of people would want a loved one to know what they would want if they needed serious health care. So the way that you can broach the subject, either, and it is an uncomfortable subject, let's just be straight about that, but
Mm-hmm.
it's to say, well, mom or dad, if something happened to you, what would you want? We'd like to know what you want so that we do what you want, right? And the same thing to your kids. You talk about your kids and say, look, kids, I want to talk to you about this. I know it's an uncomfortable subject, just like my mother talking about her burial plan, right?
Right.
But just say, look, if something happens, this is what I want. But then you also have to write out your plans, right? So you've got to do some estate planning, do your power of attorney documents, your living will, all of that. Because if you don't have it in writing, family members can disagree. And believe it or not, the healthcare system can disagree. I
Mm.
mean, everybody's heard about those stories. People put on machines forever because they never had a living will. There's a video on my YouTube channel called Eat Cookies, and it's about a gentleman who's in his 30s, bodybuilder, fell over backwards on a retaining wall and was on life support. And he had to fight with the hospital ethics committee to be able to say, take me off these machines. You don't want to be in that position.
No kidding. So these are matters that need to be taken care of. Just as a sideline, so when people need to set this up, they need to see an attorney to do this properly, right?
So in my opinion, it's better. Now, some people don't have the money to see an attorney. So in worst case situation, there are forms you can download from the internet. But what you have to know is every state has different provisions and those continually change. And as I mentioned when we first started this conversation, there's this 0.5% that crazy things are going to happen to. And if you don't have those spelled out in your power of attorney document or in your living will, or explained to your caregiver or your agent, you may be in a position where what you would have wanted does not happen because you didn't put it in writing.
Or you didn't get it right for the state that you're in, make it stickable. Do hospitals
Yeah.
sometimes, do hospitals or care, what do they call skilled nursing care places, sometimes dispute these documents?
They do. So there's 2 things. There's medical capacity or incapacity, which is you have the ability to make your decisions or you don't. And then there's legal incapacity, right? And capacity. 2 totally different things. Physicians prefer to look at patient rights. And so I'll tell you a story. So I was a guardian for a gentleman who had heart problems for years. And we went to multiple cardiologists, and the cardiologist is like, No pacemaker. It's not going to make a difference. One day his heart's just going to give out. So he's living in an assisted living community and they send him to the hospital. Hospital's like, oh my gosh, we need to put a pacemaker in. And I said, no, here's the records from his prior cardiologist. But the doctor at the hospital asked my patient, he's like, do you want a pacemaker? And the guy's like, well, maybe if you think that would be a good idea, doctor.
At a time when they're vulnerable and
right.
Yeah.
Vulnerable and stressed. And so I agreed with the doctor, but it would have been pointless to go through the whole hospital ethics committee and all of that. So the hospital put the pacemaker in, they made a lot of money. What they didn't consider was how on earth was he going to do follow-up care? He lived in an assisted living community. He would need transportation to get to appointments to do all of this. Fortunately, 2 weeks later, he just didn't wake up. The pacemaker was not a solution, but it was a money maker for the hospital.
And being in the financial world, I know all corporations, they're profit driven.
Unfortunately, they are.
Yeah. Well, great information. Your third point was that loved ones may refuse care. Talk to us about your experience with that, please.
So I'm going to share both sides of the story, right? Children will say, oh my God, my parents are so frustrated. They're driving me crazy because they won't accept help and they need help. Okay, on the parent side, what you have to realize is parents don't want kids coming in and telling them what to do or taking over their lives.
Right.
Also, there's a point where children can do too much. So there's this balance of, yes, my parents may need a little bit of assistance here, but if you do too much, and I'll give an example. So let's say that you just swoop in and you start, you get somebody to do the house cleaning and the laundry and they go get groceries and all this kind of stuff. The less things your parents have to do that they can do, the more disabled they become. It's kind of like offering somebody a wheelchair because they need it temporarily, right? And then saying, okay, we're taking the wheelchair away. Now you got to start walking again. So there's this balance between
atrophy. Right?
Yeah, between helping and helping too much and taking over control. But then on the other side, so the older people who need help, they're grieving the loss of their physical abilities. Maybe they used to be able to go do 18 rounds of golf, and now today they're too tired because they have a heart condition, right? Mm-hmm. So they're becoming more fearful of increasing health conditions, and they're losing friends, right? Because as we age, friends pass away from illnesses. Right. So they're going through a whole different grieving process.
Not able to be as socially active.
Yes, and children do not understand that. So there's knowledge gaps on both sides. It's a two-sided balance.
We haven't talked yet about, but this is relevant, dementia and Alzheimer's and that kind of thing and how that comes into play. So if you're dealing with a parent who's maybe in the early stages of that, and I can imagine, I know from that family experience, if you come in and try to help a parent who's dealing with that, or a spouse, if anybody's watching this who's dealing with a spouse, trying to help someone who's coming into dementia, presents a number of unique challenges, especially as you just alluded to, that they don't want to be helped, or they don't recognize their condition, and they don't want you doing things for them, or they might wake up tomorrow and not remember what you talked about yesterday.
Let me give you a scary statistic. 50% of people who have dementia are undiagnosed. And it's because they go to the doctor and they can't remember to tell the doctor they have a memory issue. Mm-hmm. And most primary care doctors are not really skilled in doing the testing to identify dementia or memory loss. And they don't want to give bad news. Who wants to hear that you have dementia or Alzheimer's? Because it's a scary diagnosis. It's a very scary process. And I've had clients myself who were like, I don't have Alzheimer's or dementia. They're in denial because the memory loss has gone so far that they can no longer reason or understand that there's a problem, right? So there's a point where people can understand that they have it and they don't want to talk about it. But there's also a point where they're diagnosed and they can't really understand that they have it. And that's where most of the arguments come, which is why, again, you need to do these power of attorney documents long before that point, because there's a point where somebody with memory loss can't execute a power of attorney and you're going to the court to do guardianship and conservatorship.
They're not competent. They're not allowed to sign if they're no longer competent. Right. So yeah, definitely need to be taken care of in advance. What would you say to somebody who's watching this, who's the caregiver and dealing with these challenges, as far as, the person you're caring for doesn't recognize that they have an issue, or they don't want you taking care of them. They're resistant, maybe even coming off as angry. Any pearls of wisdom for that person?
Yes. So make sure you have a diagnosis, okay, whether it's from a primary care doctor or whoever. But you can also go to geriatricians, neuropsychologists, psychologists, and neurologists to get better diagnostic tests. So what I would tell some of my clients if they were in denial, I would say, look, we don't know if it's memory loss. Let's go find out what it is so we know what to do with it and how to plan. I have an online course on my website. It's called Support Caring for Aging Parents. There's a whole module on there about Alzheimer's and dementia and how to talk to parents and how to deal with the crazy behaviors, because sometimes they're going to get angry and belligerent. I've had clients who threaten to jump out of my car, while I'm driving down the freeway.
Or get
there's
violent,
so many,
right?
yes, unexpected behaviors, and you've got to be prepared to deal with those.
Thank you. By the way, for our viewers, I'm going to be sharing Pamela's website and YouTube page a little bit later in here, so you'll be able to check out the resources she's mentioning. We should move on to, here's a big one. Number 4, caregiving can be financially challenging. Here's where it might play into our realm. We're handling our clients' rest of your life money in their portfolios, and it can cost a lot of money to get caregiving. So let's talk about that, Pamela.
So let me talk about this for the caregiver. So if you are at retirement age or about retirement age, it's extremely important to understand Medicare and what insurance you're signing up for, because most of our lives, our companies take care of health insurance, right? You have option A and you have option B. When you turn 65, you sign up for what's called Original Medicare. But then there's all these commercials on TV that promise you all these other benefits and all this other stuff. Those are Medicare Advantage plans. You have to be very careful about leaving Original Medicare and going to an Advantage plan. Now, pros and cons. Original Medicare pays for 80%. You've got to have a supplement to pay for the extra 20. But it gives you choice, right? You want to go to the Mayo Clinic? You want to get a second opinion from the Cleveland Clinic? You go do that. The minute you change over to an Advantage plan, an insurance company has you captive in the zip code that you live.
The Advantage
if
plans
you travel,
are the HMO plans?
Well, it's a Medicare Advantage plan. So it could be an HMO or a PPO, but it's called Medicare Advantage. So you give up your original Medicare and you go to this plan. So like Kaiser Permanente, right? Or Blue Cross or Humana or one of those, right? That plan is specific to the zip code that you live in. If you travel, you're not covered. If you travel under Original Medicare, everybody accepts Original Medicare. Not everybody accepts Advantage plans when you move, and they're very good about trying to save money. So you may not pay a premium, right?
Driven.
Right. You may not pay a premium, but the reason you don't pay a premium is because they're going to limit the care that you receive. So you're going to have to get pre-approvals. You want to go to a specialist, you need a pre-authorization, you need a pre-approval. Under Medicare, you can go do whatever you want. So you've got to be very careful to understand the pros and the cons of your lifestyle. Do you intend to travel? All of that comes into play when you select a Medicare plan. And so for your parents, the same thing. Those plans constrict or limit their care. And also, Medicare doesn't pay for everything. So if you need home care or somebody to come help, make some meals or take you to doctor appointments, Medicare doesn't pay for that.
Right.
It's privately paid for. And the costs of care are $30 an hour for a caregiver, $10,000 a month for a nursing home. It's unaffordable for most people who don't plan.
Yeah. Fantastic. Great information. By the way, for our viewers, in about 2 weeks, we're going to have an interview with a Medicare expert. So if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to our channel if you want to be notified when that's coming out. And we'll look forward to sharing more in depth on Medicare also. Thank you.
That will be a very helpful conversation.
Yeah. Number 5, no one wants to go to a nursing home.
Nobody does. My mother didn't, and the issue is, people who were in their 80s, when they were young, nursing homes were very different than they are today. Not that there are not good nursing homes and bad nursing homes. There's good and bad of everything.
Right.
But, unfortunately, most women end up in nursing homes because they are the primary caregivers. They care for their children, they care for their spouse, and by the time they need care, there's no family money left. So they end up on Medicaid.
Maybe their spouse is gone, yeah.
Right, and nobody to care for them, right? So they end up in a nursing home on Medicaid, which is a government program, and it's never an ideal situation. You're sharing a room with somebody. You give up your privacy. It's not ideal, but sometimes it's necessary.
And in my world, the financial side of things, we talk with clients sometimes about long-term care insurance, long-term care policies, and there's a variety of those. So maybe we'll address that in a future interview too.
Yeah, I can just talk quickly about that. The younger you are, the better, because now they have become so expensive because people are using them, right?
Yeah,
So I got a policy years ago. My annual premium is $1,800. You can't touch that anymore. Today, the premiums are, $3,000 to $5,000 a month.
yeah, especially if you're 55, 65 years old, it's almost too late. Although,
Yeah.
without referring to any specific product, there are some kinds of vehicles in our world, our financial world, where clients could put their money into something like an annuity, and then they can use the death benefit themselves during their own lifetime if they get into those long-term care situations. So sometimes, again, I'm not referring to any specific product, but there are different kinds of long-term care investments, if you will. Some that are use it or lose it. Others are you invest, and if you need it, you can use your own death benefit. If you don't, it ends up being paid to your kids. So a couple of different ways of approaching it.
Some life insurance policies also do that too. They offer it's either your life insurance or you can use it for long-term care. So yeah, there are ways around not being able to afford a policy.
Yeah, yeah. Although it's a big issue no matter what. Okay, we're coming around number 6, and we referred to this a little bit, but your point is memory loss is common in older adults. Wait a minute. I forget number 6 was. Just kidding.
Well, if you live long enough, right? So I mean, if you live past 85 and you don't have dementia before 85, you're probably going to be a little forgetful, right?
Right.
It's just it becomes common, but let me tell you why it becomes common. It becomes more common because of chronic diseases that people have earlier in life. So dementia actually starts 20 to 30 years before your diagnosis. If you have any type of heart disease or circulatory disease, or you've had a stroke, or you have a neurological condition like Parkinson's, MS, all of those conditions affect the circulatory system in your body, which affects the circulatory system in your brain, which can result in what I call circulatory dementia. It's because you've got heart problems that you've ignored. You've had a stroke. You've had all these other conditions, diabetes. They all cause circulatory issues. So again, investing in your health as young as possible, you can avoid a lot of these things when you're older. Not that things are not going to, not like, a cancer diagnosis can't happen, but the more you take care of yourself, the less likely you are to have some type of diagnosis when you're older.
Absolutely. And that, like you said, invest in your health. So whether it's having a healthy diet or walking or lifting, I'm into weightlifting. So I do pressing barbells, and I've read that can be very helpful because it pumps the blood to your brain. Doing this gets the blood to every part of your body. So you don't have to be young to do weightlifting, folks. It's for anybody. There's resources. In fact, another topic I want to address is fitness as we age, and as our
to your
parents
point,
age.
To your point, the fact that you lift weights and you do some type of exercise is good because here's the thing. People have to have surgery all the time, right? People go in every day to the hospital, have surgery. The healthier you are before the surgery, the healthier you will come out after. Surgery is hard to recover from when you're 80 or 90, and a lot of people don't. And so the more physically fit you are, the easier time you're going to have recovering. I can't stress that enough because it's not only a physical thing, it's a mental thing. You got to be mentally strong to recover from surgery.
Yeah, no kidding. Serious issues. Let's see. Oh, here's one that we know personally too, which is number 7. The healthcare system is not always friendly to the elderly. I know from personal experience, we've had grandparents in years past in these circumstances, and it's like they need somebody in there as somebody watching out for them to make sure that the hospital skilled nursing care is giving them what they need and not just taking advantage of them. What would you say to that? What's your experience?
You have to have an advocate. And this is where either your power of attorney agent comes in or a family member, so let's just talk about COVID and the whole ventilator thing, right? And intensive care. So intensive care, they were putting a lot of people on ventilators in intensive care. But what a doctor will say is, well, I'd rather put a 20-year-old in intensive care because they're more likely to survive than an 80-year-old. Yeah. I had a client who had pneumonia, and he went into the hospital and they put him in intensive care. And the doctor's like, oh, Pamela, he's lived such a good life. We should just let him go. We should not treat him. And I'm like, oh, no. I'm the agent here. I know he'll recover, give him antibiotics. And he lived another 5 years, but you have
Wow.
to advocate because what doctors do is they lump everybody into the same condition. So the average, like you're average, okay? Average people don't work out. Average people don't exercise. If
Mhm.
you don't exercise and you have a hip fracture, they may not give you a whole hip replacement. They may say, "Oh, we'll put a pin in because you don't exercise, you don't get around anyway, so you don't need the full Monty, right?" They discriminate based on your health and how active you are and your age. It's a
And the,
shame, but it happens.
and their profit, bottom line. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the roles you play in your practice, is that you serve as an advocate for clients.
I do consultations for people all over the world who have issues like what we're talking about, who say, what do I need to do? What should I be saying to the doctors? I'm having trouble with my family. There's somebody abusing. We've got theft going on. I talk about all of that.
Super. And again, folks, if you're watching this video, in a few minutes, we'll be sharing the links for how you can get a hold of Pamela. Number 8, we're getting through to coming up towards number 10. Number 8 is to have a backup plan in case your primary caregiver is no longer able to provide care. What do you mean by that?
Caregivers are selfless to the extent that they will not go to the doctor. They will not take care of their health. They will become extremely burned out, and most become sicker than the person that they care for. And so that means, especially if you're an Alzheimer's caregiver, there's a statistic out there that says 30% of Alzheimer's caregivers die before the person they're caring for. So your backup plan, if you're a spouse, has to be, is it my kids? Is it somebody else? Who is it? Because
Gotcha.
you can never think that just because you're that caregiver, you're going to live longer than the person that you care for. Many times, unfortunately, it doesn't happen because caregivers don't like to ask for help, and they become so involved that they don't have time to take care of themselves. And it's a shame.
And that's such, again, I've been doing what I do for 30 years. And sadly, this comes around for people as they age. And we've seen it for several of our clients. And I know how very hard it is for the caregiver, especially if they don't have help. We'll get to the support one in an issue here. Number 9, families don't always get along when it comes to caregiving. This is a big one, right?
It's a huge one. I would have children who would come into my office and they'd be like, "Oh, Pamela, we've had your business card. We saw you speak. We read your book. We've been on your website. But now things are really bad and our family doesn't get along." And I'm like, "Welcome to the club." I was appointed, power of attorney, medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney, guardian, conservator, because families don't get along. And it just happens that, maybe sometimes the parents can't trust the kids. I was appointed by the parents to be their guardian instead of their children, right? Family
Sometimes,
members
yeah.
don't always get along and they disagree. And unless there's somebody that can kind of mediate all this, and there's interest in the families working together, there can be a lot of contentious things that happen. I've seen children contest their parents' wills. If you're doing a will, you want to get it on video so that your children can't say years later, "Oh, they didn't mean to give all that money to the charity. They really wanted to give it to me."
Wow,
You know?
fantastic. What a great insight that is. And we all have seen various dynamics in families. Some of my clients are blessed with beautiful relationships with wonderful, mature children who they can trust and will take care of them. Others, kids might have drug problems or alcohol problems or just not be the kind of person you want looking out for you. And I can imagine in the real world, one kid wants this, and the other kid wants the other, and can create real strife and problems for the caregiver.
Yeah, children will want their inheritance over care for parents, right? Well, let's just put mom and dad in a crappy, nursing home or a really bad assisted living. They'll die quicker and then there'll be more money for us. I hate to
Sad,
say it,
sad,
but it
sad,
happens.
sad but true. It does happen.
So you have to be very careful who you appoint as your agent.
Indeed. Somebody you can really count on to look out for your best interest.
Yes.
Let's talk about number 10. We're coming around. This is caregiving support is important. We've been talking throughout here what a strain it can be on the caregiver and all the stress they're dealing with and all the issues they're dealing with, and how you just said a moment ago how a lot of caregivers end up their own health failing because they're so busy looking after the others. And I imagine other things, just family dynamics and relationships with other people. If you're so focused on the caregiving, all kinds of other areas are sacrificed. Can you
The
share with us your
emotional
experience on
stress.
that?
Yeah, the emotional stress on caregivers is huge. And if you don't have a support system, whether it's an online support group, I have an online support group on Facebook, or a physical support group, or people that you can talk to, you've got to be able to lift your mind out of the day-to-day grind of, I have 2,000 things I have to get done, and there's no time for me and no time for anything else. You've got to be able to lift yourself up for that, to even look at your situation objectively and say, you know what? I need to get a caregiver. I need to find help. And people will say, you know what? I don't have the money to do that. Look into Medicaid as early as you can. There are volunteers out there from churches, from community organizations. But if you don't ask and you don't go out to seek that information, you're not going to find it. I will tell you that help exists if you want it and you make the time to go find it.
Mm.
And that's so important for caregivers.
You mentioned Medicaid. Now, most of my clients, because I'm an investment manager, we're a financial advisor, most of our clients have money, have significant assets. So are they going to get any help from Medicaid?
No, but here's the thing. Even though you may have significant assets, I can tell you, I used to manage 24-hour care for clients at the tune of $30,000 a month.
Wow.
And so if you're going to live 5 or 10 or 15 years,
Those assets can be
you
worn
really
down.
have that much money. You would be surprised how quickly $1 million can go. So for Medicaid, you do have to be low income. You've got to have low resources. You have to need care. But
Even if you can't get the Medicaid, you referred to a few other resources, volunteers. And,
there's veterans benefits, there's home equity loans, there's reverse mortgages, there's all kinds of other things that can fund care before you get to the point where you need Medicaid. But I always recommend, if you think that you're going to run out of money or your parents are going to run out of money, investigate it as early as possible, because there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through to qualify.
There are, and we won't dive into this too deeply, but I've been asked over the years, how do we get rid of my assets, give it to the kids or whatever, so that I can show Medicaid I have nothing and be able to collect? And there's all kinds of loopholes jump for that.
That's a sticky wicket. So
it is. In fact, I think it's become illegal to do that, where you're not supposed to.
So it's not illegal. It's legal.
Back.
Well, there's a 5-year look back if you're giving away assets, but do you really, again, if you're going to do this, you're creating an irrevocable trust, which means it can never be changed. Mm-hmm. You're going to give all of your assets to your children. Do you really trust them not to spend those assets
once they've got the money?
Care? Because you're giving away everything. This is like you're closing a door. You're never going to have control over those assets again. Do you really trust that person so that you can qualify for Medicaid, or would you rather have control over your money and have it spent for your well-being and eventually need Medicaid?
Yeah. Well, we're
certainly
not advocating, all the regulators watching this, we're not advocating anybody giving their money away to pretend to have nothing.
Yeah, no, I don't advocate for that, because you give up total control.
Yeah.
And I've seen it go very badly.
In 30 years experience, I've never seen it be a good idea to try to do something like that.
Yeah, no.
Now, we've covered 10 points. We've been talking for a little over half an hour. Let me show people a few other things here. I want to share with you, whoops, not that screen, this one. This is Pamela's website, and you can't see her web address there. It's this, PamelaDWilson.com is where you can find Pamela's website. Now, remind me on here, where your book is. I want to tell people about your book.
So if you go under library, there's a link to the book.
There it is right there. So here on the page, come to library, click down to book, and the Caregiver Trap. Here it is.
Yep, Caregiving Trap.
And your funny thumbnail.
Yes.
Show your pair, it depends.
It's everything depends on something, right? People will ask me questions and I'm like, well, I can answer that, but it depends on these qualifications. And then if you go under the support and more button, I have 3 online programs there. They're all free. They're no charge. It's how to take care of aging parents. One talks about guardianship, and the other goes really into depth about power of attorney, who you should appoint, the process, and everything.
Fantastic. So, folks, if you're watching this, then this is relevant to you. This is a great resource for you to check out Pamela's website. And again, it's PamelaDWilson.com. The other thing I want to bring to your attention is Pamela has a great YouTube channel. And it is, just look up Pamela D. Wilson, right, Pamela?
Yeah, it's at Pamela D. Wilson, Caregiving Expert
Ah, here it is right here.
is where it is.
At
Or if you
Pamela
just
D.
type in my
Wilson.
name, yeah, Pamela D. Wilson YouTube, it'll come up. I've
It'll
got
come
over
up.
800 videos here.
Woo!
And every week I answer questions. So caregivers pose a question and I answer it.
Yep, great. So what a fantastic resource for you. And I'm going to just remind people, I'm a financial advisor, and we, for the last 30 years, have been helping individuals, families, and small businesses to manage their investments to work toward their financial goals. Our website is you can see it here, and the URL is www.clarkatterbury.com. And I also have a link here for you, this goOnceHub.com/ClarkAtterbury. If you enter that in your browser, it'll take you to a website where you can check our schedule in case you want to chat about investment management, retirement planning, that sort of stuff that we do. And I also want to point out to you that we have a YouTube channel. If you're not tuned to it yet, check it out. We've got almost 100 videos on there so far. We're still new. We've just been doing YouTube for almost a year. If this is the kind of thing that interests you, investment management, retirement planning, and related matters like we're talking about today, then you might want to subscribe to that. So Pamela.
And I want to put one plug in for you, Clark. So when I talk to people about like life planning and care planning, there's 3 rungs, right? There's the financial part, which is Clark. A lot of people think they can't afford a financial planner or financial investor or a financial advisor. You would be surprised. Then there's the medical side where you need like a medical expert. And then there's the legal side where you need the legal planning. So it really is a 3-pronged process, and you need help from support people.
Thank you, Pamela. Appreciate that. We're financial advisors here at Atterbury Investment Management. And before we go, Pamela, any parting thoughts, last tidbits of wisdom you want to share with people?
For caregivers, it's an uncharted territory. There's so many unexpected things that happen. The more that you can plan, even though you say, I don't have time to plan, the better off you'll be, the easier it will be in the long run. So make the time to have these conversations in your family. Go seek help, education, and information.
And don't try to go it alone, right? Too hard. There's too many resources, too much information. So thank you so much, Pamela. I'm really grateful that you took the time to share with us your wisdom and your experience that can benefit our clients, anybody else watching this. And we hope to have you back on again another time.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, folks, we'll see you soon. Stick around for our disclosures I have put on